Welcome to Ranting Politics Headline Updates. I'm JOC, and today we've got a packed show covering the most explosive developments in politics and national security. Coming up, Trump scores a major diplomatic win with Mark Fogel's release from Russian detention. Then Israel and Hamas face a crucial deadline as Netanyahu matches Trump's ultimatum for hostage release. We'll dive into shocking revelations about American tech found in that Chinese spy balloon, Vice President Vance's stern warning to Europe about strangling AI innovation, and an unprecedented military surveillance operation targeting Mexican drug cartels. Stick around as we break down these critical stories and what they mean for America's future. In a major diplomatic breakthrough, the Trump administration has secured the release of Mark Fogel, an American teacher who spent over 3 years in Russian detention. The deal, announced by National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, marks a significant achievement in U.S.-Russia relations amid ongoing tensions. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff personally traveled to Russia to bring Fogel home, making him the first high-level U.S. official to visit the country since the Ukraine war began. The exchange, described as a show of good faith from Moscow, was facilitated through relationships in the Middle East, particularly Qatar, which helped establish connections with Russian intermediaries. Fogel, who taught history at Moscow's Anglo-American school, was arrested in August 2021 after being found with 17 grams of cannabis, which his family maintains was prescribed for severe spinal pain. He received a harsh 14-year sentence at a Russian labor camp, raising serious concerns about his health and survival. The breakthrough came after months of careful negotiations, with Trump personally promising Fogel's mother at a Pennsylvania rally that he would secure her son's release. The president met with Fogel in the Oval Office, noting that Russia's cooperation could signal positive movement toward ending the conflict in Ukraine. For the Fogel family, this marks the end of what they described as the darkest and most painful period of their lives. His sister confirmed that despite weather delays, the family will reunite with Mark in Texas, bringing closure to a 3-year ordeal that had seemed hopeless just months ago. This successful negotiation demonstrates the administration's commitment to bringing Americans home, though several U.S. citizens remain detained in Russia, including Stephen Hubbard and Russian-American dual national Ksenia Karelina, both designated as wrongfully detained by the State Department. In a dramatic escalation of the Gaza hostage crisis, both Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Trump have laid down matching ultimatums to Hamas: release all remaining hostages by noon Saturday or face devastating consequences. The synchronized deadlines represent an unprecedented alignment of U.S. and Israeli pressure on the terror group. Netanyahu's demand calls for the immediate return of all 31 living hostages and the bodies of 36 others still held in Gaza. The Israeli leader warned that failure to comply would trigger intense fighting, with IDF forces already massing along the border in preparation for potential military action. This hardline stance directly mirrors Trump's own declaration that Hamas must return all hostages, not in what he called dribs and drabs, but in a complete release. The president's stark warning that he would let hell break loose after the deadline shows just how closely Washington and Jerusalem are coordinating their approach. Hamas has dismissed these threats, claiming that maintaining the ceasefire is the only path to securing the hostages' freedom. However, security analysts suggest this response is merely a negotiating tactic, with Hamas trying to leverage public outcry over recently released images of emaciated hostages to extract additional concessions. While Trump has emphasized that the final decision rests with Israel, his administration has multiple options to punish Hamas without deploying U.S. troops. These could include targeting Hamas assets in countries like Qatar and Turkey, or supporting Israeli operations to hunt down Hamas leadership wherever they may be hiding. The synchronized ultimatums come after Hamas halted hostage exchanges, claiming Israel violated the ceasefire agreement. But experts view this as a transparent attempt to gain more leverage, even as it risks provoking a massive military response that could permanently alter the landscape of this conflict. Should Hamas fail to meet Saturday's deadline, both leaders appear prepared to back their ultimatums with decisive action, potentially marking a dangerous new phase in the Gaza war. A shocking revelation has emerged about that Chinese spy balloon shot down off the South Carolina coast last year. It was packed with American-made technology. At least 5 U.S. companies had their equipment on board this sophisticated surveillance platform, raising serious questions about how our own tech is being used against us. Military analysts have gotten their hands on the recovered equipment, and what they found inside is concerning. We're not talking about basic components here. This balloon was carrying satellite communication modules, advanced sensors, and other high-end surveillance gear. Some of it was even stored in what appears to be a regular foam cooler, like you'd pack your drinks in for a day at the beach. Among the recovered items was an Iridium 9602 messaging module, made right here in Virginia. The company says they can't control how their products end up being used. Fair enough, but it's a wake-up call about how our commercial technology can be repurposed for espionage. The balloon's shopping list didn't stop there. It was also carrying parts from Texas Instruments, Omega Engineering, Amphenol All Sensors, and onsemi, all American companies. There was even some Swiss tech in the mix from ST Microelectronics. Now, intelligence agencies don't believe the balloon successfully transmitted any of its collected data back to Beijing before we shot it down. But the fact that China was able to acquire and integrate so much US-made technology into their surveillance systems is raising red flags about our export controls and the need to better track how our commercial tech might be finding its way into the hands of our adversaries. This discovery comes as a particularly awkward reminder of how our own innovation can be turned against us, especially as tensions with China continue to simmer over issues of national security and technological supremacy. In a dramatic showdown at the Paris AI Summit, Vice President J.D. Vance didn't mince words as he warned European leaders that their heavy-handed approach to artificial intelligence regulation could suffocate this revolutionary technology in its cradle. Speaking to a room full of CEOs and heads of state, Vance made it crystal clear that the Trump administration intends to keep America as the world's AI powerhouse, and they're not about to let European red tape get in the way. The vice president took direct aim at the EU's massive regulatory framework, particularly calling out their Digital Services Act and privacy rules. According to Vance, these regulations are nothing but a bureaucratic nightmare that smaller companies simply can't afford to navigate. He's got a point. When you're spending all your money on lawyers instead of innovation, something's got to give. But it wasn't just about economics. Vance didn't hold back in labeling European-style content moderation as flat-out authoritarian censorship. As he put it, there's a world of difference between protecting kids from predators online and having government bureaucrats decide what opinions grown adults are allowed to see. The divide between American and European approaches couldn't have been more stark. While European leaders were pushing for their Comprehensive AI Act, the world's first complete set of AI rules, the US and Britain notably refused to sign the summit's final statement about AI being inclusive, open, ethical, and safe. And just to drive his point home, Vance didn't stick around to hear European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen or French President Macron's responses. He made his speech and headed straight for the door, though he did later meet with them separately. Talk about making an exit. The vice president also took a not-so-subtle swing at China, warning about the dangers of partnering with authoritarian regimes that might be offering suspiciously cheap tech. This comes right on the heels of Chinese startup DeepSeek shaking up the market with their new AI model, a move that sent NVIDIA's stock tumbling and had some questioning America's tech leadership. In a significant escalation of border security operations, the U.S. military has ramped up its surveillance of Mexican drug cartels to unprecedented levels. Over just 10 days in early 2025, military aircraft conducted at least 18 surveillance missions, a dramatic increase from the typical once-monthly flights that have been standard practice until now. These aren't your average patrol planes, folks. We're talking about some serious hardware being deployed here. The Navy's P-8s, equipped with sophisticated radar systems typically used for hunting submarines, have been crisscrossing the border region. Even more surprising, they've pulled the legendary U-2 spy plane out of its Cold War playbook for a nearly 6-hour mission, something that's never been done before for cartel surveillance. The missions have covered the entire southwestern border, from California to Texas, with some aircraft making bold loops around the Baja Peninsula, getting close enough to Sinaloa to make things interesting. The Air Force's RC-135 Rivet has been particularly busy, using its advanced capabilities to intercept communications from the ground. This massive increase in military surveillance comes as President Trump positions the armed forces as the new front line in America's fight against drug trafficking. It's a significant shift from the traditional law enforcement-led approach, and it's raising some eyebrows among national security experts. The big question on everyone's mind is what exactly the administration plans to do with all this intelligence. Some officials are quietly concerned this could be laying the groundwork for direct military action against the cartels, especially given Trump's recent moves to designate them as foreign terrorist organizations. The president has already deployed thousands of additional troops to the border, even though illegal crossings are at their lowest point in years. These troops can't make arrests or seize drugs, but they're providing crucial intelligence support to border operations. But here's the catch. Taking on the cartels isn't like fighting terrorist groups in other parts of the world. These are commercial operations deeply embedded in local power structures, sometimes with connections to the very Mexican government officials we need as partners. It's a complex web that military might alone can't untangle. As border czar Tom Homan put it, while the cartels might think twice about taking on the U.S. military, we're definitely in for an escalation in violence. With record profits at stake and the full weight of the U.S. military bearing down, this situation is bound to get more intense before it gets any better. And that wraps up today's headlines on Ranting Politics. We've covered Mark Fogel's dramatic release from Russia, Netanyahu, and Trump's unified ultimatum to Hamas, the concerning revelation about American tech and Chinese spy balloons, Vance's warning on European AI regulations, and the unprecedented military surveillance of drug cartels along our southern border. Stay up to date with all our coverage by following us on X at RantingRP, check out our YouTube channel, and visit rantingpolitics.com for in-depth analysis and breaking news. This is JOC signing off, and thank you, our loyal listeners, for choosing Ranting Politics headline updates. We'll be back soon with the updates you need to navigate these interesting times. Until then, stay tuned, stay informed, and as always, stay free.